Two teenagers walked into a luxury car dealership only to be thrown out minutes later. But an email they received moments after leaving brought them back and transformed everything from the staff's perception to the cars themselves, ultimately reshaping the company's future. The glass doors of Velocity Motors slid open with a soft hiss, and Thomas Cooper stepped inside, his sneakers squeaking faintly against the polished marble floor. Behind him, Robbie Parker adjusted the strap of his backpack, his fingers brushing against the sleek tablet tucked inside. The showroom gleamed under the fluorescent lights, rows of luxury cars lined up like trophies on display. But neither boy paid much attention to the Ferraris or Lamborghinis. Their eyes were fixed on the centerpiece, a McLaren Artura hybrid, its carbon fiber body catching the light in ways that made it seem almost alive. "Look at this," Thomas murmured, crouching slightly to get a better angle of the car's aerodynamic curves. He pulled out his phone and snapped a quick photo of the wheel design. "This isn't just engineering, it's art." Robbie nodded, running his hand along the edge of the hood. "And the engine bay? It's practically begging to be analyzed." He tapped the screen of his tablet, pulling up schematics they had studied the night before. "I'm telling you, if we could just get some real-world data from something like this, we'd have enough to refine our predictive model even further." Their voices were low, almost reverent, as they moved around the car, inspecting every detail. Thomas paused by the rear spoiler, snapping another picture. "Imagine being able to predict when one of these components fails before it actually happens. No more breakdowns, no more accidents caused by mechanical errors." Robbie smirked. "People would think we're magicians." Before Thomas could respond, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Excuse me, what do you two think you're doing?" They turned to see a man in his mid-40s striding toward them, his tailored suit and neatly combed hair giving him an air of authority. Norman Thornton, the nameplate on his chest read. His expression was a mix of irritation and condescension as he stopped a few feet away, arms crossed. "This isn't a museum," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "You're distracting our clients. Do you even know how much these cars cost? This isn't some place for kids to gawk at things they'll never afford." Thomas felt heat rise to his cheeks, but Robbie spoke first, his voice calm despite the tension. "We weren't gawking. We're here because—" "I don't care why you're here," Norman interrupted, waving them toward the door. "Out, now, and try not to touch anything on your way." A few customers nearby glanced over, some smirking, others shaking their heads. Thomas clenched his fists, resisting the urge to argue. Instead, he grabbed Robbie's arm and muttered, "Let's go." As they walked toward the exit, Thomas couldn't help but glance back. Near the reception desk, a young woman stood watching them. Gabriella Rogers, her name tag said. She looked about 22, her blonde hair tied back in a ponytail, and there was something apologetic in her gaze. Earlier, she had greeted them warmly, asking if they needed help finding anything. But now, she stayed silent, her lips pressed into a thin line as Norman ushered them out. The automatic doors closed behind them with a finality that stung. Thomas exhaled sharply, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Can you believe that guy? Like we're just nuisance teenagers or something." Robbie shrugged, though his jaw was tight. "Forget him. People like that always underestimate us. Let's just focus on what matters." Thomas nodded, reaching for his phone to check the time. That's when he saw the notification flashing on the screen. An email from Novacore Motors. He opened it quickly, scanning the lines. His heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Robbie asked, noticing the sudden change in Thomas's expression. "They approved our proposal," Thomas said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The AI app for predictive diagnostics. They want to meet tomorrow morning." Robbie's eyes widened. "Are you serious? That's huge." "I know." Thomas stared at the email, the rejection from moments ago already fading into the background. "Norman might think we're nobodies, but tomorrow—" He trailed off, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Tomorrow, we'll show him exactly who we are." Behind them, through the showroom window, Gabriella watched as the two boys walked away. She hesitated for a moment, then glanced down at her own phone. A news article about their recent win at Tech Genius popped up, the same event where she'd seen them present last month. They hadn't been lying when they said they knew what they were talking about. She frowned, glancing toward Norman, who was already back to chatting with a potential buyer. Maybe she should have spoken up. But as a newcomer to the dealership, challenging someone like Norman felt risky. Still, something told her this wasn't the last time she'd see those two boys. Meanwhile, outside, Thomas and Robbie climbed onto a city bus, the hum of its engine blending with the buzz of excitement between them. For now, the sting of rejection lingered, but only faintly. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Novacore Motors headquarters, casting sharp geometric shadows across the sleek conference room table. Thomas and Robbie sat side by side, their posture a mix of nervous energy and quiet confidence. Across from them, Peter Willis leaned back in his chair, his piercing blue eyes scanning the presentation slides projected onto the wall. Around the table, executives scribbled notes on tablets or whispered among themselves, but Thomas barely noticed. His focus was razor-sharp, every word he spoke deliberate. Traditional diagnostic systems rely on reactive measures, Thomas began, gesturing to the screen behind him. By the time a problem is detected, it's often too late. Costly repairs, safety risks, even accidents. Our app changes that. He clicked to the next slide, revealing a complex flowchart of algorithms and data points. Using machine learning, we analyze real-time performance metrics from a vehicle's onboard systems. If there's an anomaly, say unusual vibrations in the transmission, we flag it before it escalates. Robbie took over, his voice steady as he tapped the tablet in front of him. The screen lit up with a live demo of the app interface. Here's how it works in practice. Let's say you're driving one of your Velocity models. The app detects irregularities in the brake system, a potential failure point. It sends an alert directly to the driver's phone and schedules maintenance at the nearest authorized service center. No guesswork, no delays. Peter leaned forward slightly, his interest palpable. Impressive, but let's talk scalability. How do you ensure this system can handle data from thousands, or even millions, of vehicles simultaneously? Thomas exchanged a glance with Robbie, who nodded almost imperceptibly. They had prepared for this question. We've built our infrastructure using cloud-based servers optimized for high-volume processing, Robbie explained. Each vehicle's data is encrypted and anonymized to protect user privacy, and we've stress-tested the system with simulated loads far exceeding current market demands. And what about integration? Another executive chimed in. How seamless will it be for existing customers? That's where our partnership comes in, Thomas replied smoothly. With access to Novacore's fleet, we can fine-tune the app's compatibility with your vehicles. The more data we gather, the smarter the system becomes. By the time it launches publicly, it'll feel like second nature to users. The room fell silent for a moment as Peter considered their answers. Then he smiled, a rare, genuine expression that seemed to light up the entire space. You two are something else, he said finally. I've seen dozens of pitches in my career, but yours stands out. Not just because of the technology, but because of the vision behind it. Thomas felt a flicker of pride, though he kept his expression neutral. Beside him, Robbie shifted slightly, his fingers tapping against the edge of the table, an unconscious habit whenever he was excited. Peter stood, signaling the end of the formal presentation. Let's cut to the chase. We're offering $35 million for full rights to the app, plus a 12% royalty share on all future revenue generated. Additionally, we'd like you both to join us as consultants, working on upcoming projects within Novacore. Your expertise would be invaluable. Thomas's breath caught. It was more than they had dared to hope for. But it wasn't just the money, it was the validation, the recognition that their work mattered. He glanced at Robbie, whose grin was already spreading uncontrollably. There's one condition, Peter added, his tone casual but firm. Testing must occur exclusively on Velocity Motors vehicles. Given their status as our flagship brand, it makes sense to prioritize them. Robbie let out a soft laugh, shaking his head. Irony at its finest, he muttered under his breath, loud enough for Thomas to hear. Thomas fought back a smile as he turned back to Peter. We accept the terms, he said, extending his hand. But don't think we've forgotten where we started. Peter raised an eyebrow, amused. Oh? And where's that? The showroom floor, Thomas replied simply, his grip firm as they shook hands. Where someone underestimated us. Later, as they stepped out of the building into the crisp autumn air, Robbie couldn't contain himself any longer. Can you believe it? $35 million. For us? He spread his arms wide, spinning in a circle like a kid on a sugar rush. What are we even supposed to do with that kind of money? Thomas chuckled, adjusting the strap of his backpack. First things first, we celebrate. Dinner tonight, my treat. Anywhere you want. Anywhere. Robbie raised an eyebrow, grinning mischievously. There's this steakhouse downtown I've been dying to try. Done. Thomas laughed, pulling out his phone to check the time. As he did, his eyes lingered on the simple watch on his wrist, the one his grandfather had given him years ago. It was scratched and worn, nothing like the luxury pieces he'd seen in the Velocity showroom. But it meant everything to him, a reminder of where he came from and how far he'd come. As they stepped into the waiting car, Robbie's grin faded slightly, replaced by a thoughtful expression. Do you think that girl knew who we were when she talked to us yesterday? Thomas shrugged. Maybe. She mentioned seeing us at Tech Genius last month. But either way, she didn't get a chance to say anything before the other man showed up. That guy? Robbie spat the name like it left a bad taste in his mouth. He's a walking cliché. All bark, no bite. True, Thomas agreed. But karma has a way of catching up to people like him. Speaking of which, he stopped suddenly, turning to face Robbie. What do you say we pay Velocity Motors a little visit tomorrow? Show them exactly what they missed out on. Robbie's grin returned, wider than ever. Now that sounds like a plan. Back at Velocity Motors, Gabriella was tidying up the reception desk when her manager approached her, clipboard in hand. Gabriella, I need you to handle inventory checks today. Make sure all the cars are accounted for and ready for tomorrow's showcase. She nodded distractedly, her mind still replaying the image of those two boys leaving the showroom yesterday. Something about them had stuck with her. Maybe it was the determination in their eyes, or the way they carried themselves despite being dismissed so rudely. Whatever it was, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd see them again soon. Little did she know, her instincts were about to be proven right, in ways she could never have imagined. The next morning, it was a beautiful day near the Velocity Motors parking lot. Thomas and Robbie arrived in a rented McLaren Artura, its hybrid engine purring softly as they pulled into a prime spot near the entrance. The car gleamed under the morning light, its carbon fiber accents catching glimmers that seemed almost taunting. They stepped out in tailored suits, Thomas wearing his grandfather's watch prominently on his wrist, Robbie adjusting the knot of his tie with practiced ease. Norman Thornton was already inside, sipping coffee from a paper cup as he reviewed sales figures at his desk. He barely glanced up when the automatic doors slid open, assuming it was just another customer. But when he heard the unmistakable hum of a high-performance engine pulling up outside, curiosity got the better of him. Setting down his cup, he walked to the showroom window and froze. There they were, the same two boys who had been kicked out less than 48 hours ago. Only this time, they weren't gawking teenagers snapping photos on their phones. They looked like they belonged there, every bit as confident and composed as any executive stepping out of a luxury vehicle. Norman's jaw tightened as he watched them step confidently toward the entrance, their posture radiating authority. "Morning," Robbie said brightly as they passed Norman, not breaking stride. His tone carried just enough mockery to make Norman bristle. Norman opened his mouth to respond, but before he could muster a word, Peter Willis strode into the showroom. The CEO of Novacor Motors was an imposing figure, his presence commanding immediate attention. Behind him trailed several executives, all dressed impeccably in dark suits. Norman instinctively straightened, forcing a smile onto his face. "Mr. Willis," he exclaimed, extending a hand. "What brings you here today?" Peter ignored the gesture, his gaze fixed instead on Thomas and Robbie, who now stood near the reception desk exchanging quiet words with Gabriella. Her expression lit up as she recognized them, her earlier suspicions confirmed. They really were someone important. She gave them a small nod, then turned back to her work, though her curiosity clearly lingered. "Norman," Peter began, his voice clipped and devoid of warmth, "I'd like to introduce you to our newest directors of innovation." He gestured toward the two young men, who exchanged smirks before turning to face the room. Thomas Cooper and Robbie Parker will be overseeing cutting-edge projects within NovaCore, starting with predictive diagnostics for velocity motors. Norman's eyes widened, disbelief warring with panic on his face. "Directors? But they're just kids." "And yet," Peter continued, his tone icy, "they've accomplished more in 2 days than you have in years. Effective immediately, you're terminated." The air in the showroom seemed to thicken. Customers browsing nearby stopped mid-conversation, their heads swiveling toward the unfolding drama. Norman's face flushed crimson, his hands trembling as he reached reflexively for his name badge. One of the executives stepped forward, plucking it from his lapel without ceremony. "You can't do this," Norman spluttered, his voice rising in desperation. "I've worked here for over a decade, and in that time," Peter replied coolly, "you've alienated potential partners, dismissed innovation, and let personal biases cloud your judgment. Your services are no longer required." With a dismissive wave, he turned away, leaving Norman standing alone, humiliated and speechless. Gabriella approached cautiously as the commotion settled, offering Thomas and Robbie hesitant smiles. "So, I guess congratulations are in order?" she said, her voice tinged with both awe and amusement. "Thanks," Thomas replied, returning her smile. "Though honestly, we didn't expect things to escalate quite so quickly." Robbie chuckled. Neither did Norman, judging by the look on his face. Gabriella glanced briefly at the former salesman, who was now slinking toward the exit, shoulders hunched in defeat. "He always thought he was untouchable," she admitted quietly. "Guess karma doesn't play favorites." "Well, neither do we," Robbie quipped, earning a laugh from Gabriella. "Speaking of which, how would you feel about working directly with us? We'll need someone familiar with Velocity's lineup to help test the app." Her eyes widened in surprise. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely," Thomas interjected. "You were the only one who didn't treat us like we didn't belong here. Consider it overdue recognition." Before Gabriella could respond, Peter rejoined them, clapping his hands together briskly. "All right, team, let's get to work. Thomas, Robbie, your first task is to integrate the app with our fleet-wide diagnostic systems. Gabriella, you'll assist them. Let's make sure everything runs smoothly." As the group dispersed, Gabriella lingered for a moment, watching Thomas and Robbie confer with the technical team. There was something magnetic about their energy, the way they balanced each other, seamlessly blending ambition with humility. She couldn't help but feel a sense of pride knowing she'd played even a small part in their journey. Later that afternoon, as the showroom emptied and the hum of activity faded, Gabriella found herself lingering near the McLaren still parked outside. Thomas noticed her standing there and approached, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know," he said, leaning casually against the car, "this whole thing feels surreal. 2 days ago, we were being kicked out of here. Now," he gestured vaguely at the building behind him, "now we're running the show." Gabriella smiled faintly. "I'm glad it worked out for you. You deserve it." Thomas tilted his head, studying her for a moment. "And you deserve better than being stuck answering phones. That's why we asked for you specifically. This is your chance to prove yourself too." Gabriella felt a spark of excitement ignite within her. Maybe this wasn't just their story, it could be hers too. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Thomas and Robbie settled into their roles as directors of innovation at NovaCore Motors, their days filled with meetings, testing sessions, and brainstorming marathons. Gabriella, now officially promoted to their assistant, became an integral part of the team. Her deep knowledge of Velocity's fleet and her natural curiosity about technology made her indispensable. Together, they formed a dynamic trio, each bringing something unique to the table. One evening, long after most employees had gone home, the three found themselves in one of the company's research and development garages. The space was alive with the hum of machinery and the soft glow of computer screens. A prototype Porsche Taycan sat in the center of the room, its sleek lines illuminated by overhead LED lights. It was the latest addition to their testing pool, courtesy of a new partnership with Porsche, a testament to how quickly their influence had grown. "All right," Thomas said, tapping a stylus against his tablet. "Let's run the diagnostics again. This time, I want to see if we can isolate the anomaly in the suspension system." Gabriella nodded, pulling up the app interface on her laptop. "I've already synced the data from the last test drive. Shouldn't take more than a minute to process." Robbie leaned against a workbench nearby, arms crossed as he watched the numbers scroll across the screen. "You know, it's funny. We started this whole thing trying to predict failures in engines, and now we're optimizing everything: brakes, suspensions, even tire pressure." "That's because failure doesn't just happen in one place," Thomas replied without looking up. "It's everywhere, waiting for the right moment to strike. Our job is to stay ahead of it." Gabriella glanced between them, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "And here I thought you two were just tech prodigies. Turns out you're philosophers too." Robbie laughed, tossing a wrench lightly into the air before catching it. "Don't let that get around. Ruins the mystique." As the diagnostic results appeared on the screen, Gabriella pointed to a spike in the graph. "There it is, the same irregularity we noticed before. Looks like it's tied to high-speed cornering maneuvers." Thomas frowned, zooming in on the data. "Interesting. Let me cross-reference this with the McLaren specs. If we can find a pattern, we might be able to adjust the algorithm to account for performance differences across models." While Thomas worked, Robbie wandered over to the Taycan, running his hand along its smooth surface. "You ever think about how much these cars represent? They're not just machines, they're symbols of power, freedom, ambition. Kind of like what we're building." "It's ironic," Gabriella mused, joining him by the car. "Cars used to be all about horsepower and speed. Now they're becoming platforms for innovation. You're helping redefine what they mean." Robbie grinned, leaning back against the hood. "Careful, or people will start calling us visionaries." "I think they already do," she shot back, raising an eyebrow. "Have you seen the headlines? Teenage tech titans revolutionize automotive industry. Not bad for a couple of guys who got kicked out of a dealership." Thomas joined them, slipping his tablet into his bag. "Speaking of which, I heard Norman's working at a used car lot now. Serves him right." Gabriella chuckled. "Small victories, huh?" "Speaking of victories," Robbie said, turning serious for a moment, "you've been our bridge between the tech side and the automotive world. Don't forget that." She looked down, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thanks. That means a lot. Honestly, I never imagined I'd end up here when I started at Velocity. But I'm glad I did." The sound of footsteps echoed through the garage, and Peter Willis appeared in the doorway, his suit jacket slung over one arm. He surveyed the scene with an approving nod. "Still hard at work, I see. Good. We've got another meeting tomorrow with Porsche executives. They're eager to see what else you've got up your sleeves." "We'll be ready," Thomas assured him, his tone confident. Peter smiled faintly. "I know you will. Just remember, one step at a time. Even the best engines need time to warm up." As Peter left, the three exchanged glances, a shared understanding passing between them. They weren't just building apps or optimizing cars, they were shaping the future. And yet, amid all the success, there was still room for moments like this. Quiet conversations in dimly lit garages, surrounded by the tools of their trade. Later that night, as they wrapped up their work, Gabriella lingered by the Taycan, her fingers tracing the curve of its fender. "Do you ever stop to think how crazy this is?" she asked softly. "A year ago, none of us would have guessed we'd be here." Thomas chuckled, adjusting the strap of his backpack. "Not really. Crazy's kind of our thing." Robbie grinned, tossing his arm around Gabriella's shoulders. Besides, why settle for normal when you can change the game? They stood there for a moment, the silence broken only by the distant hum of machinery. For all the challenges they'd faced, the rejections, they had emerged stronger, united not just by ambition but by trust and mutual respect. As they walked out of the garage together, the cool night air wrapping around them, Gabriella glanced at Thomas's wrist. "That watch," she said, pointing to the simple timepiece. "You've worn it every day since I met you. What's the story?" Thomas hesitated, then smiled. "It belonged to my grandfather. He gave it to me when I was 12, the same year he bought me my first computer. Every time I look at it, I'm reminded of where I came from, of all the people who believed in me when no one else did." Gabriella nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It suits you." They reached the parking lot, where the McLaren awaited them. As Thomas climbed into the driver's seat and Robbie took the passenger side, Gabriella waved goodbye, her silhouette framed by the glowing lights of the garage. Driving away, Robbie turned to Thomas. "You think we'll ever get used to this? The fame, the money, everything?" Thomas shook his head, gripping the steering wheel firmly. "Nope, and honestly, I don't want to. The day we stop being amazed is the day we lose sight of why we started." This story reminds us that sometimes being underestimated can fuel the greatest revolutions. What would you do if someone told you your dreams were impossible? Comment below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey. See you in the next video.